So there I was, standing in my driveway at 7:43 a.m. on a Tuesday morning, clutching a lukewarm cup of coffee that tasted like regret and desperation, staring at what can only be described as the most aggressively boring garden gnome in the history of suburban landscaping, when Karen Pemberton from 3 houses down decided that this completely inoffensive ceramic disaster wearing a tiny red hat was apparently the hill she was literally going to die on. Let me back up. The whole thing started about 2 weeks ago, when I made the catastrophic mistake of thinking I could have nice things in my front yard without the HOA Homeowners Association turning into a tribunal of judgment and unnecessary paperwork. I'd bought this garden gnome at a yard sale for like $3, which should have been my first clue that something was wrong with it. But honestly, I thought it had character. It was this chubby little dude with a fishing pole, just vibing in my flower bed next to my half-dead petunias that I keep forgetting to water, because apparently I'm incapable of keeping anything alive, including my own dreams, and also that succulent my mom gave me last Christmas that she swore was impossible to kill. But I somehow managed to murder within 6 weeks. The gnome was fine. Completely, utterly, mind-numbingly fine. It didn't play loud music, it didn't have flashing lights, it didn't spontaneously combust or attract raccoons, or do literally anything except exist in the most passive way possible. It was so boring that I'm pretty sure watching paint dry would have been more thrilling than looking at this thing. In fact, I'm convinced that if boredom could be weaponized and used in military applications, this gnome would be classified as a tactical assault weapon. But apparently, according to Karen Pemberton, who, by the way, has the kind of haircut that looks like she specifically asked the stylist to make her look like she wants to speak to every manager in a 50-mile radius and probably tipped them extra to achieve that exact effect. My garden gnome was aesthetically inappropriate and failed to meet the community standards of tasteful outdoor decoration. I found out about this complaint because I received an official letter from the HOA. An actual letter, with a stamp, in the year of our Lord 2000 and whatever. The letter was 3 pages long, single-spaced, detailing in excruciating specificity how my garden gnome violated Section 7.4.2, subsection C of the HOA bylaws regarding ornamental garden fixtures and their visual impact on neighborhood cohesion. There were footnotes, for a garden gnome complaint. Someone had spent actual time, possibly billable hours, researching and documenting why my $3 yard sale gnome was a threat to the very fabric of our suburban existence. Dude, I cannot make this up. This woman literally reported my garden gnome for being too boring, not too flashy, not too tacky, not too anything, too boring. The letter actually used the phrase, lacks sufficient visual interest to justify its presence in a prominent yard position. My garden gnome got rejected harder than I did at senior prom. And trust me, that's saying something because I showed up to prom wearing a vest I thought made me look sophisticated, but actually made me look like a teenage magician who'd lost his rabbits and was having an existential crisis about his career choices. So I'm standing there, reading this letter, and I can feel my blood pressure rising to levels that would make my doctor schedule an emergency intervention and possibly have me committed for observation. And I'm thinking to myself, Noah, you have 2 choices here. You can either be a reasonable adult and just remove the gnome and move on with your life like a functioning member of society, or you can go completely off the rails and engage in the pettiest act of suburban revenge in the history of planned communities, possibly setting a new record for most ridiculous overreaction to an HOA complaint that will be studied by future generations of petty people. Guess which option I chose? Go ahead, guess. I'll wait. If you guessed reasonable adult, then you clearly don't know me at all, and we need to have a serious conversation about your ability to read character motivations. And also maybe you should reconsider your career as a psychic or fortune teller or whatever it is you thought you were good at. I marched myself down to Karen's house. This immaculate beige monstrosity with perfectly edged lawn that probably requires a team of landscapers and the tears of neighborhood children to maintain, along with what I suspect is some kind of dark ritual performed under the full moon involving organic fertilizer and the souls of garden gnomes past. And I knocked on her door at precisely 8:07 a.m., which I knew was right in the middle of her morning yoga routine, because this woman posts her entire life on the neighborhood Facebook group like it's her personal blog, and we're all dying to know about her chakras and her juice cleanse and her thoughts on Mercury being in retrograde. Karen answered the door wearing a purple yoga outfit that cost more than my car payment, holding a green smoothie that looked like something you'd find growing in a ditch behind a chemical plant. And she had the audacity, to smile at me like we were old friends, and she hadn't just filed a complaint about my completely harmless lawn ornament that was literally just sitting there minding its own business and bothering absolutely no one except apparently her delicate sensibilities. "Noah," she said, in that voice people use when they're pretending to be friendly, but are actually calculating how quickly they can end the conversation and get back to their morning routine of judging everyone within a 3-mile radius. "What a pleasant surprise. Is everything okay?" "Oh, everything's great, Karen," I said. And I'm pretty sure my eye was twitching at this point because stress apparently manifests in my face as uncontrollable muscle spasms that make me look like I'm attempting to communicate in Morse code. "I just received the most fascinating letter from the HOA about my garden gnome. You wouldn't happen to know anything about that, would you?" Karen's smile didn't even flicker. This woman had the poker face of a professional gambler and the moral flexibility of a politician during election season who just got caught in a scandal but is still trying to spin it as a positive character trait. "Oh, that," she said, taking a sip of her swamp juice that probably contained kale and spinach and the ground-up hopes and dreams of people who thought they could be happy. "Well, Noah, you have to understand that we have standards in this neighborhood. That gnome was just so drab, so uninspiring. I mean, if you're going to have yard art, shouldn't it at least be interesting?" I stood there, blinking at her, trying to process the sheer audacity of what I was hearing. My brain was doing that thing where it short circuits, and all I could think was a long, continuous internal scream that sounded something like, "ah," but stretched out over approximately 45 seconds, and possibly reaching frequencies that only bats and very confused dolphins could detect. "Let me get this straight," I said slowly, because apparently when I'm angry, I turn into a lawyer cross-examining a hostile witness in a courtroom drama that's about to have a shocking plot twist. "You filed an official complaint with the HOA because my garden decoration wasn't interesting enough for you. Not because it was offensive, not because it violated any actual aesthetic guidelines, but because you personally found it boring?" "Exactly," Karen said brightly, like I'd just understood quantum physics after months of struggling with the most basic concepts of elementary school math. "I'm so glad you get it. The neighborhood aesthetic is important, Noah. We all have to do our part to maintain a certain standard of visual excellence." She gestured vaguely at her own front yard, which looked like it had been designed by someone who'd watched too many home improvement shows and had access to their spouse's credit card without supervision or any kind of spending limit or adult supervision. There were these weird geometric planters arranged in what I think was supposed to be a feng shui pattern, but actually looked like someone had just randomly placed expensive containers around and hoped for the best. A fountain that made annoying trickling sounds at all hours of the day and night, like a very persistent and incredibly irritating neighbor who won't shut up about their vacation to Cabo, and, I kid you not, a bronze statue of a heron that was so realistic I'd seen multiple actual birds try to mate with it, which was both hilarious and deeply concerning from a wildlife psychology perspective. "Right," I said. "Standards, got it, crystal clear, perfectly transparent." I went home and sat in my garage for approximately 20 minutes, just staring at the wall and contemplating my life choices and wondering at what point I'd taken a wrong turn that led me to having territorial disputes with yoga-obsessed suburban moms about lawn ornaments. This is what it had come to. This was my existence. I was a 34-year-old man having a feud with a neighbor over garden decorations. My parents didn't raise me for this. They raised me to be a doctor or a lawyer or literally anything other than a guy who gets into HOA feuds over garden gnomes. My mother had such high hopes. She thought I'd cure cancer or argue Supreme Court cases, or at least become a successful accountant. Instead, here I was, sitting in my garage next to my broken lawnmower and boxes of Christmas decorations I kept meaning to organize, plotting revenge against a woman whose primary hobby was making everyone around her miserable with complaints. But then something clicked in my brain. Maybe it was the 3 cups of coffee I'd consumed in the span of 45 minutes. Maybe it was the lack of sleep, because I'd been binge-watching true crime documentaries until 2 a.m. and had developed an irrational fear of both strangers and people I know. Maybe it was just the accumulated frustration of living in an HOA community where you need written permission in triplicate to paint your mailbox a slightly different shade of the approved color. Whatever it was, I had an idea. An absolutely, gloriously, stupendously petty idea that would either make me a neighborhood legend or get me permanently ostracized from all future block parties. If Karen wanted interesting yard art, I was going to give her interesting yard art. I was going to give her the most interesting yard art this neighborhood had ever seen, possibly the most interesting yard art in the entire state, maybe even setting some kind of record for most aggressively weird lawn decoration in a planned community. I was going to replace my boring garden gnome with something so spectacular, so unexpected, so completely ridiculous that it would live in the annals of HOA infamy forever and possibly be mentioned in future HOA board meetings as a cautionary tale about what happens when you push a mild-mannered homeowner too far. I was going to get a life-size statue of a Roblox character. Now, before you judge me, actually, no, go ahead and judge me. I completely deserve it, and I'm fully aware of how insane this sounds. Let me explain my thought process here, which made perfect sense at the time, but in retrospect might have been influenced by sleep deprivation and caffeine overdose. See, I needed something that was technically within HOA regulations. The bylaws said nothing about size limitations on garden statues, only that they had to be in good taste and repair, and not contain offensive imagery or messaging. A Roblox character, with its blocky, generic design, technically met all those criteria. It was just an abstract humanoid figure. A very large, very yellow, very blocky abstract humanoid figure that would either delight or horrify everyone who saw it, possibly both simultaneously. Finding someone to make this statue was actually easier than you'd think, which says something concerning about either my Google search skills or the state of custom statue manufacturing in this country, or possibly the fact that we live in a weird timeline where you can get literally anything made if you're willing to pay for it and don't ask too many questions. I found a guy named Derek, who ran a custom sculpture business out of his garage in the next town over. And when I explained what I wanted, there was this long pause on the phone where I genuinely thought he'd hung up on me, or possibly had a stroke from trying to process my request. "You want," Derek said slowly, speaking like someone who's trying very hard to make sure they understood correctly before committing to anything. A 6-foot-tall statue of a Roblox character for your front yard in a HOA neighborhood. And you want this? Why, exactly? Revenge, I said simply. Petty, suburban revenge. Another pause. Longer this time. I could hear Derek breathing on the other end of the line, and I imagined him questioning his life choices and wondering if this was some kind of elaborate prank, or possibly a setup for a reality TV show about people with questionable decision-making skills. You know what? Derek finally said, and I could hear the grin in his voice. Yeah, I can do that. This is either the weirdest commission I've ever gotten or the greatest. I haven't decided which yet, but I'm leaning toward greatest. Can you make it doing the default dance? Is that possible? Oh, it's possible, Derek said, and now he sounded genuinely excited. It's absolutely possible. In fact, I'm going to make this the best damn Roblox statue anyone has ever seen. This is going to be my magnum opus, my Mona Lisa, my David. Future sculptors will look back on this moment and weep at what they could never achieve. 3 weeks later, 3 agonizingly long weeks of me keeping my boring garden gnome in place, and Karen shooting me these smug little smiles every time she drove past my house in her unnecessarily large SUV that she definitely didn't need, but bought anyway because apparently owning a vehicle that could transport a small army or possibly serve as a mobile command center during the apocalypse was a crucial part of her identity. Derek called me. "It's ready," he said, and I swear I could hear the pride in his voice, the kind of pride usually reserved for parents watching their children graduate or artists unveiling their masterpiece at a gallery opening. Noah, I gotta tell you, this is the most ridiculous thing I've ever made, and I once made a 7-foot statue of Guy Fieri for a restaurant in Vegas that specialized in fusion cuisine and questionable life choices. This Roblox statue is magnificent. It's absurd. It's everything you asked for and more. When do you want me to deliver it? How about Saturday morning? I said, my heart racing with a mixture of excitement and terror. Around 10 a.m.? Right when everyone's out doing their yard work and can witness the unveiling? My man, Derek said, and I could tell he was grinning so hard his face probably hurt. You're my new favorite customer. This is going to be legendary. That Saturday, I woke up at 6 a.m. with the kind of nervous energy usually reserved for first dates or job interviews, or that time I accidentally agreed to do a presentation at work and forgot about it until 15 minutes before it started, and had to improvise the entire thing while sweating profusely and questioning every choice I'd ever made. I'd spent the previous evening removing my boring garden gnome. May he rest in peace in my garage next to the Christmas decorations I keep meaning to organize and the boxes of kitchen appliances I bought on a whim and never used. And I'd prepared the perfect spot for my new masterpiece, carefully measuring and remeasuring to make sure it would be positioned for maximum visibility and impact. I made myself breakfast, which I couldn't eat because my stomach was doing gymnastics. I took a shower, which didn't help calm my nerves. I paced around my house like a caged animal, checking my watch every 30 seconds, wondering if I was making a huge mistake, or if this was the greatest decision I'd ever made, or possibly both at the same time. Derek showed up at 9:58 a.m. in a truck with a covered trailer, which was exactly the kind of mysterious arrival that immediately caught the attention of every nosy neighbor within a 3-block radius. I saw curtains twitching in windows, like we were in some kind of spy thriller. I saw people suddenly deciding that now was the perfect time to check their mailboxes, or trim their hedges, or do literally anything that gave them an excuse to be outside and witness whatever was about to happen. Because apparently nothing brings a neighborhood together quite like the promise of potential drama, and possibly witnessing someone's complete mental breakdown in real time. And Karen? Oh, Karen was in her driveway, washing her already immaculate car with this portable pressure washer setup that probably cost more than my entire garage and came with more attachments and settings than I have in my entire kitchen. And she kept glancing over with this expression that was trying to be casual, but was actually radiating curiosity so intense it was practically visible, like she was literally vibrating with the need to know what was happening, but also trying to maintain her superiority and pretend she didn't care. "You ready for this?" Derek asked me as we stood at the back of his trailer, his hand on the tarp covering my masterpiece. "I was born ready," I lied, because I absolutely was not ready for this. I had no idea what I was doing, and there was a very real possibility that this was going to backfire spectacularly and end with me being permanently shunned by my neighbors and possibly arrested for disturbing the peace or creating a public nuisance or whatever charge they use for people who install ridiculous lawn decorations. Derek pulled back the tarp with the kind of dramatic flourish usually reserved for magic shows and product reveals on shopping networks. Dude. This statue was magnificent. It was glorious. It was everything I'd dreamed of and more. Standing at exactly 6 feet tall, painted in the brightest, most aggressive shade of yellow that had probably ever existed in nature or synthetic pigments, was a perfect recreation of a Roblox character in mid-default dance pose. The classic smiley face, rendered in perfect detail. The blocky body that defied all conventional understanding of human anatomy. The arms positioned at that awkward angle that only makes sense in a video game physics engine. The legs frozen in mid-movement, capturing that exact moment of digital chaos. It was simultaneously the most beautiful and most absurd thing I'd ever seen. A perfect marriage of artistic craftsmanship and complete insanity. "Derek," I said, my voice choked with emotion that I didn't know I was capable of feeling about a lawn ornament. "You've created a masterpiece. This is art. This is what Michelangelo would have made if he had access to video games and a deep-seated need for petty revenge." "I know," Derek said, equally moved, wiping what might have been a tear from his eye. "I think I peaked as an artist with this one. It's all downhill from here. I might as well retire now because I'll never create anything this perfect again." We spent the next 20 minutes, the longest, most suspenseful 20 minutes of my entire life. Longer than waiting for my college acceptance letters or finding out if I got that job promotion, carefully unloading and positioning the statue in my front yard. It was heavier than it looked, which makes sense, because Derek had made it out of some kind of reinforced fiberglass that could apparently withstand a nuclear blast and probably outlast civilization itself, and we had to use a dolly and a concerning amount of huffing and puffing and strategic maneuvering to get it into position without damaging it or throwing out our backs or crushing any of my remaining alive plants. The moment we set it upright in my flower bed, carefully adjusting it to face the street at the perfect angle, time seemed to slow down. Birds stopped chirping. The wind ceased blowing. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked, and it sounded like judgment. The universe itself seemed to pause and take notice of what we had created, this monument to suburban pettiness and artistic expression. Karen dropped her pressure washer hose, just straight up dropped it. Water started spraying everywhere, soaking her designer yoga pants that probably cost $300, flooding her driveway, but she didn't even notice because she was too busy staring at my new garden statue with an expression that cycled rapidly through confusion, disbelief, horror, rage, and what I'm pretty sure was the early stages of an aneurysm, or possibly a complete psychological break from reality. Noah, she called out. Her voice strained like she was trying very hard to remain calm and not immediately start screaming, or possibly calling the police, or the HOA, or possibly an exorcist. What is that? I turned to her with the biggest, most innocent smile I could muster, channeling every ounce of fake pleasantness I'd ever witnessed from customer service representatives and people who work in retail during the holidays. Oh, this? This is my new garden statue. You said the old one was too boring, so I got something more interesting. You like it? I think it really adds something special to the neighborhood. Really brings some personality, don't you think? Karen's mouth opened and closed several times, like a fish that had suddenly developed the ability to question its life choices and was having a full existential crisis about its place in the aquatic ecosystem. Is that a Roblox? It's a Roblox character, yes, I said, using the same tone you'd use to explain something very simple to a small child who's asking why the sky is blue. Life-size, custom-made, handcrafted by a genuine artist. I thought it really added some visual interest to the yard, you know? Really brings some personality to the neighborhood aesthetic. Exactly what you asked for, actually. But Karen looked around wildly, as if searching for backup or possibly a lawyer, or maybe just someone who could confirm that she wasn't having a stress-induced hallucination brought on by too many green smoothies and not enough actual food. It's ridiculous, it's absurd, it's interesting, I offered helpfully, tilting my head with mock curiosity. Unique? A conversation starter? Visually stimulating? All the things you said my old gnome wasn't? By this point, we'd attracted a substantial crowd. Mr. Henderson from next door was standing on his lawn holding a rake. Not raking anything, just holding it and staring with his mouth slightly open. The Johnsons had come out onto their porch with their coffee, their teenage son behind them with his phone already out and recording. Even old Mrs. Chen, who was like 90 and usually couldn't care less about neighborhood drama because she'd lived through actual historically significant events and couldn't be bothered with suburban nonsense, had somehow materialized on the sidewalk with her walker, looking at my statue with what I can only describe as bemused respect and possibly admiration for the sheer audacity of what I'd done. "This is unacceptable," Karen sputtered, and I could see her mentally flipping through the HOA handbook trying to find a clause that would help her, desperately searching for any regulation that could possibly apply to this situation. There has to be a rule against this. There has to be something we can do about this monstrosity. Actually, I said, pulling out my phone where I'd already queued up the relevant HOA bylaw sections, which I'd highlighted and annotated and practically memorized like I was studying for the bar exam. According to Section 7.4.2, Subsection C, garden statues are permitted as long as they're in good repair, don't contain offensive imagery, and meet community standards of taste. My statue is brand new. Literally just made, can't get more good repair than that. Features no offensive content whatsoever. It's literally just a yellow smiley face on a blocky body. And as for taste, well, you were the one who said we needed more. Interesting yard art. You specifically complained that my old decoration lacked visual interest. This definitely has visual interest. In fact, I'd argue it has more visual interest than anything else in this neighborhood. Karen's face was turning an impressive shade of red that reminded me of that time I tried to eat ghost pepper wings on a dare and immediately regretted every decision I'd ever made leading up to that moment. This is not what I meant, and you know it. You're deliberately being difficult. Am I? I asked, pressing my hand to my chest in mock offense. Because your complaint specifically said my old gnome lacked sufficient visual interest to justify its presence in a prominent yard position. I'd say a 6-foot-tall Roblox character doing the default dance provides plenty of visual interest. In fact, I'd argue it's the most visually interesting lawn ornament in the entire neighborhood, possibly in the entire county, maybe even the state. We could probably enter it. In competitions. "It's hideous!" Karen shrieked, and several neighbors actually took a step back because she'd reached that pitch that only dogs and marine mammals should be able to hear, a frequency that probably violated noise ordinances if such measurements were being taken. "Beauty is subjective, Karen," I said serenely, channeling every Philosophy 101 class I'd ever taken and every pretentious art gallery opening I'd ever been forced to attend. "What you call hideous, I call avant-garde suburban installation art. What you see as ridiculous, I see as a bold statement about the intersection of digital culture and physical space. This statue is a commentary on modern suburban life and our collective relationship with virtual worlds. It's practically museum-worthy." Mr. Henderson started laughing. Like, actually laughing. This quiet, normally reserved guy who I'd maybe said 10 words to in the 3 years I'd lived here. This man who I'd only ever seen doing yard work and occasionally checking his mail, was doubled over, wheezing with laughter, using his rake to hold himself upright like it was a lifeline, keeping him from collapsing onto his perfectly manicured lawn. Mrs. Chen was openly smiling, which I'm pretty sure was her version of cackling with glee, a rare display of emotion from someone who'd seen everything and was impressed by very little. Even the Johnsons' teenage son had come outside and was taking pictures on his phone from multiple angles, probably already posting them to TikTok or Instagram or whatever platform the youth use these days to document the chaos of adult suburban warfare, adding hashtags like #suburbandrama and #HOA nightmare, and probably getting thousands of likes from strangers who understood the universal appeal of petty neighborhood revenge. "You did this on purpose," Karen said, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper that was somehow more terrifying than her shrieking. "You did this specifically to spite me. This is a personal attack." "I did this," I corrected, maintaining my calm demeanor, even though inside I was doing a victory dance that rivaled my statue's pose. "To comply with your feedback. You filed a complaint about my yard decoration being too boring. I addressed your concerns by replacing it with something more visually stimulating. If anything, you should be thanking me for being such a responsive and considerate member of the community. I took your criticism to heart and made improvements. That's what good neighbors do, Karen." Karen's eye was twitching now. Actually twitching. I'd driven her to the same stress-induced facial spasms that she'd given me 2 weeks ago. It was poetic justice. It was beautiful. It was the culmination of 2 weeks of planning and one extremely patient custom sculptor and approximately $3,000 that I definitely didn't have, but had charged to my credit card anyway, because sometimes you have to invest in your petty revenge schemes if you want them to really land and make an impact that will be remembered for years to come. "This isn't over," Karen said, pointing at me with a shaking finger, her voice trembling with barely contained rage. "I'm calling an emergency HOA meeting. We'll see what the board has to say about your little stunt. We'll see how funny you think this is when you're facing fines and possibly legal action." "You do that," I said cheerfully, giving her a little wave. "I'll be right here, enjoying my completely legal and totally compliant garden statue. Maybe I'll even add some solar lights to it. Really make it pop at night. Make it a proper neighborhood landmark." Karen stormed back to her house, leaving her pressure washer still running and flooding her driveway, which meant she was either extremely angry or having some kind of stress-induced breakdown. Possibly both. Definitely both. The water was flowing down into the street now, creating a small river that was probably violating water conservation ordinances, but I wasn't about to point that out because I'm petty, but I'm not a monster. As soon as she was gone, Mr. Henderson walked over, still grinning like he'd just witnessed the best entertainment he'd seen in years. "That," he said, "is the funniest thing I've seen in 15 years of living in this neighborhood. How much did that cost you? Because whatever it was, It was worth it. More than I'm comfortable admitting, I said. But yeah, absolutely worth every penny. Worth every penny, he agreed, reaching out to shake my hand like I'd just accomplished something genuinely impressive. Karen's been making everyone miserable with her complaints for years. Last month she reported me because my grass was allegedly 1/8 of an inch taller than the HOA maximum height requirement. She brought a ruler to measure it. An actual ruler. She crouched down on my lawn with a measuring device like some kind of grass detective. Are you serious? Dead serious. The woman is obsessed with control. It's like her entire identity revolves around finding things to complain about. He patted me on the shoulder with genuine appreciation. You've done a good thing here, Noah. A weird, somewhat deranged thing, but a good thing nonetheless. Someone needed to stand up to her. Over the next few days, my life-size Roblox statue became something of a neighborhood celebrity, possibly even achieving minor social media fame. Kids would stop by to take pictures with it, posing next to it and mimicking the default dance. Teenagers would detour on their way home from school just to see it and add it to their Snapchat stories. Someone even left a bouquet of flowers at its base, like it was a memorial, which was either hilarious or concerning. I'm still not sure which. There were car honks from passing drivers. People I'd never met would slow down while driving by just to stare. I'd accidentally created a genuine attraction, but the real entertainment came exactly 1 week later when Karen managed to convene an emergency HOA board meeting, which apparently required her to call in multiple favors and possibly make threats because emergency meetings weren't usually convened for lawn decoration disputes. She'd sent out this extremely formal email invitation to all board members. She was the vice president, naturally, because of course she was, because people like Karen always find their way into positions of minor authority where they can maximize their potential for making others miserable. With the subject line, Urgent, Violation of Community Aesthetic Standards in all caps with 3 exclamation points, which I'm pretty sure violated some kind of email etiquette rule if such a thing existed, and possibly also violated the spirit of not being a drama queen. I showed up to that meeting prepared like I was defending my doctoral thesis. I'd printed out every relevant section of the HOA bylaws, highlighted and cross-referenced. I'd taken photos of every other questionable lawn decoration in the neighborhood, including Karen's own weird bronze heron situation, along with the Martinez family's inflatable decorations that stayed up for 6 months, the Williams family's garden gnome collection that numbered at least 40 individual gnomes arranged in what I could only assume was meant to represent some kind of gnome civilization, and several other equally questionable aesthetic choices that had somehow never warranted official complaints. I'd even prepared a PowerPoint presentation titled The Artistic Merit of Blocky Yellow Video Game Characters in Modern Suburban Landscaping, which I'm aware sounds absolutely insane, but felt completely reasonable at 2 a.m. when I was making it, fueled by coffee and righteous indignation and possibly a mild psychological break from reality. The meeting was held in Karen's living room, which was exactly as pristine and aggressively beige as I'd imagined, decorated in that particular style that suggests someone watched every HGTV show ever made and decided that personality was overrated. There were 5 board members total. Karen as vice president, some guy named Todd who was president, and looked like he'd rather be literally anywhere else in the world, including possibly a dentist's office or jury duty, a woman named Patricia who seemed perpetually confused about why she was there and what was happening, an older gentleman named Robert who kept nodding off despite the drama unfolding around him, and Margaret, the treasurer, who looked at the photo of my statue on Karen's tablet and immediately started giggling in a way that suggested she was trying very hard to maintain professional composure, but failing spectacularly. So, Todd said wearily, rubbing his temples like he had a migraine that had been developing since the meeting invitation arrived in his inbox, and possibly before that. Maybe even from the moment he'd agreed to join the HOA board and take on this position of absolutely thankless responsibility. We're here to discuss Noah's garden statue. Karen has filed a formal complaint and requested emergency board action. "It's an abomination," Karen declared dramatically, pulling up a photo of my Roblox statue on her unnecessarily large smart TV that probably had more technology than the space shuttle. "It's tacky, it's juvenile, it's completely inappropriate for our neighborhood aesthetic. It's a mockery of everything we stand for as a community." "It's hilarious," Margaret interjected, not even trying to hide her smile anymore. "Sorry, Karen, but it is. I drove by it yesterday with my kids, and we literally laughed out loud. They want one now. I had to explain why they can't have a 6-foot Roblox statue in our yard." Karen shot her a look that could have curdled milk, killed plants, and possibly caused minor geological disturbances. "This isn't about whether it's funny, Margaret. This is about maintaining community, standards, and protecting our property values." "Right," I said, standing up with my folder of documentation like a lawyer about to absolutely destroy the opposition with facts and logic and carefully researched bylaws. About those community standards, let's talk about Section 7.4.2, subsection C, shall we? Let's discuss exactly what constitutes an acceptable lawn ornament according to our community guidelines. For the next 25 minutes, I proceeded to give what was probably the most thorough legal defense of a Roblox statue that has ever existed in human history, possibly the most passionate argument about lawn decorations ever delivered in a suburban living room. I cited bylaws with page numbers and subsections. I referenced precedents from previous HOA decisions about other decorations. I showed photos of other questionable decorations that had never received complaints, creating what was essentially a visual catalog of acceptable suburban weirdness. I even brought up the philosophical question of who gets to define taste and whether one person's aesthetic preferences should dictate community-wide policies. "The fact is," I concluded, gesturing at my PowerPoint that I'd advanced to my final slide, which featured a photo of my statue with the caption, "Art or Abomination? You decide." My statue violates 0 HOA regulations. It's well-maintained, contains no offensive imagery. It's literally just a yellow smiley face on a blocky body, which is about as inoffensive as imagery gets, and is within my property lines. The height isn't regulated. The style isn't banned. The color yellow isn't prohibited. If anything, it's created more community engagement than any lawn decoration in this neighborhood's history. I've had more conversations with neighbors in the past week than I've had in 3 years of living here. People are actually talking to each other because of this statue. It's brought the community together, which I would argue is the entire point of having a community in the first place. Todd looked at Karen with an expression that was part exhaustion, part resignation, and part barely concealed amusement. Karen looked at Todd with an expression that was pure desperation mixed with indignation. Patricia still looked confused, like she'd just woken up from a nap and wasn't entirely sure where she was. Robert was definitely asleep, producing small snoring sounds that nobody was acknowledging. Margaret was scrolling through her phone, probably looking at the photos her kids had taken with my statue. "He's right," Todd finally said, and I watched Karen's soul leave her body in real time, ascending toward whatever plane of existence souls go to when they've been defeated in HOA board meetings. Legally, there's nothing we can do. The statue doesn't violate any written rules. We can't fine him, We can't make him remove it. Weird isn't against regulations. But it's a Roblox! Karen practically screamed, her voice reaching that pitch again that probably disturbed dogs in neighboring counties. It's a video game character, in someone's front yard, in a nice neighborhood. This is insanity. Which isn't explicitly banned in our bylaws, Todd said tiredly, like he'd had this exact conversation before about different topics and was exhausted by the repetitive nature of HOA disputes. Look, Karen, I get it. It's weird. It's definitely weird. I drove by it this morning and did a double take. But weird isn't illegal. If we start banning lawn decorations just because we personally don't like them or find them strange, where does it end? Do we ban pink flamingos? Garden gnomes? Those weird reflective ball things? What about the Williams family's gnome collection? Or your bronze heron? My heron is tasteful, Karen protested. Karen, Margaret said gently, looking up from her phone. I've seen birds try to mate with your heron. Multiple times. Different species. It's causing genuine confusion in the local bird population. That's completely different. Is it, though? I asked, unable to resist. Because I'd argue that a statue causing actual wildlife to attempt reproduction is more disruptive to the neighborhood than a statue that just makes people laugh. The meeting ended with no action taken against my statue, which meant I'd won. I'd actually, legitimately won. Karen tried to call for a vote to amend the bylaws to specifically ban video game-inspired statuary and other digital culture references in physical lawn decoration form. But Todd shut that down immediately, pointing out that bylaw amendments required a 30-day notice period and a majority vote from all homeowners in the community, not just the board, and there was absolutely no way that was happening because most people found my statue either amusing or harmless, and some people had already expressed interest in getting their own unusual lawn decorations now that the precedent had been set. I walked out of that meeting feeling like I'd just won an Olympic gold medal in petty suburban revenge, achieved the ultimate victory in neighborhood warfare. My Roblox statue was staying. It was officially, legally, completely allowable. It was protected by the very bylaws that Karen had tried to use against me. Karen didn't speak to me for approximately 6 weeks after that incident. She'd cross the street if she saw me coming, literally changing her route to avoid any possibility of interaction. She'd give me these glares that suggested she was mentally planning my demise in increasingly creative ways, possibly involving her pressure washer and organic fertilizer. Honestly, I was a little worried she was going to escalate to actual property damage or arson or hiring a hitman off Craigslist, or whatever it is angry suburban moms do when they've been thoroughly defeated. But she never did. She just stewed in her anger and posted passive-aggressive things on the neighborhood Facebook group about people who don't respect community values and the degradation of neighborhood standards without ever mentioning me or my statue specifically, which everyone understood was about me anyway, because it was extremely obvious. But here's the thing about petty revenge. Sometimes it has unexpected positive consequences that make the entire endeavor worthwhile in ways you never anticipated. My Roblox statue became a legitimate neighborhood attraction, a genuine landmark. Parents would bring their kids by to see it specifically, making it a stop on their evening walks. Teenagers used it as a landmark when giving directions to friends. Yeah, turn left at the giant yellow Roblox, you can't miss it. Someone even started a neighborhood tradition of leaving different accessories on it. One week it had sunglasses, the next week a scarf, then a tiny umbrella during a rainstorm, followed by a Santa hat during the holidays, a graduation cap, a baseball cap, and various other items that appeared and disappeared as people contributed to the ongoing decoration of my statue. Mr. Henderson and I became actual friends, bonding over our shared experience of Karen's HOA tyranny and her years of making everyone's lives slightly more difficult with her endless complaints. The Johnsons invited me to a barbecue where I learned they'd also been on the receiving end of Karen's complaints, something about their trash cans being visible from the street for 12 minutes longer than the allowed time after trash pickup. Mrs. Chen gave me homemade cookies and told me I was a troublemaker, but a good troublemaker, which, coming from a 90-year-old woman who'd lived through actual historical events, felt like high praise. I'd become more integrated into the neighborhood through my ridiculous revenge statue than I'd ever been through normal neighborly interaction. People knew my name now. They waved when they drove by. I was invited to things. And Karen? Well, about 3 months after the great Roblox statue incident of whatever year this is, she actually genuinely apologized. Sort of. She came over one evening around sunset, looking exhausted and significantly less aggressive than usual, almost vulnerable, and said, "Noah, I think I may have overreacted about your lawn decoration." I almost fell over. Actually had to grab my doorframe for support. May have? Fine, I did overreact, she admitted, and I could tell this was physically painful for her to say, like each word was being extracted with dental tools. I've been so focused on keeping this neighborhood perfect, on maintaining these standards, that I forgot, I don't know, that people actually live here, that it's supposed to be a community, not a museum or a showroom. My therapist said I have control issues stemming from deeper anxieties about aging and relevance, and my fear of losing status. So yeah, I'm working on it. Apparently, I've been insufferable. Karen, I said, genuinely touched, and also deeply suspicious that this was some kind of elaborate setup or possibly hidden camera show. Did you just have a complete character development arc? Did you just grow as a person? She actually laughed. Like a real laugh, not the polite, social laugh she usually deployed. My therapist also said I use arbitrary rules and standards as a way to feel in control of things I can't actually control, which is apparently unhealthy. Who knew? Good for you, I said, and I meant it. Hey, you want to take a selfie with the Roblox statue? It's kind of a tradition now. Everyone does it. She hesitated for exactly 3 seconds before saying, "You know what? Sure. Why not? Might as well embrace the chaos." We took the selfie, Karen and I standing on either side of my ridiculous yellow statue. Karen posted it on Facebook with the caption, "Learning to embrace the chaos and let go of arbitrary standards," which got like 200 likes and approximately 50 comments saying things like, "Character development," and "growth," and "Is this real or did someone hack Karen's account?" and "Hell has frozen over." She even tagged me in it, which felt like a peace treaty. So here I am, still living in my HOA neighborhood with my increasingly famous Roblox statue that has somehow become both a symbol of suburban resistance and a genuinely beloved community fixture that appears in people's Instagram posts and neighborhood gossip. Derek the sculptor calls me occasionally to ask how it's holding up, and to tell me he's gotten 3 more commissions for similar ridiculous statues thanks to the photos that went viral on local social media, including someone who wants a life-size Minecraft Steve and someone else who wants a Fall Guys character, and he's considering expanding his business to specialize in video game lawn statues because apparently there's a market for this. The statue has weathered 2 rainstorms, a minor hailstorm, and 1 incident where some teenagers tried to steal it, but gave up because it weighs approximately 200 pounds, and they severely underestimated their own strength and the logistics of statue theft. It's become a sort of guardian of the neighborhood, this bright yellow beacon of ridiculous joy standing in my flower bed next to petunias that I'm actually managing to keep alive now because people keep asking about them when they stop to take photos. And every time I look at that bright yellow, eternally dancing Roblox character in my front yard, permanently frozen in mid-default dance, I'm reminded that sometimes the best revenge isn't actually revenge at all. It's just refusing to let other people's arbitrary standards dictate your joy, or determine what you can and can't do with your own property within legal bounds. Also, it's definitely a little bit revenge. Let's be honest. Let's be completely honest. It's mostly revenge. But it's revenge that accidentally made everyone's lives a little more interesting, which I think makes it the best kind of revenge. The kind where everyone wins eventually, except maybe the person who started the whole thing. But even she eventually comes around and learns a valuable lesson about controlling her control issues and letting people live their lives. Would I recommend spending $3,000 on a life-size Roblox statue to spite your HOA-obsessed neighbor? Absolutely not. That's a terrible financial decision, and I'm still paying off that credit card bill in monthly installments that make me wince every time I look at my bank account. Would I do it again? In a heartbeat. Without hesitation. I'd do it twice. Because sometimes, just sometimes, you have to stand up for what you believe in, even if what you believe in is the fundamental right to have weird lawn decorations that confuse and alarm your neighbors while technically violating absolutely no rules whatsoever. That's what freedom looks like, folks. That's the American dream. A man, his house, and his 6-foot-tall yellow video game character statue that technically violates zero regulations, but definitely violates the spirit of suburban conformity, and makes everyone question their life choices while also making them smile. And honestly, I wouldn't have it any other way.